Welcome. What you're about to experience is not just another video, it's a free course. No fluff, no filler. Just a direct and meaningful journey into the most powerful ideas behind Carl Gustav Jung's psychology. The goal? To help you deeply understand your shadow and come out of this more emotionally stable, resilient, and, most importantly, free. Who should stick around? If you are someone who struggles with anxiety, depression, guilt, anger, grief, or emotional pain of any kind, this is for you. If you find yourself repeating toxic cycles, getting stuck in patterns of self-sabotage and regret, and you just can't seem to break free, no matter how hard you try, then yes, keep watching. If you carry around a deep, unnamed emotional weight, a heaviness you can't quite explain but feel every single day, then know that what you'll learn here will speak directly to that pain. This isn't just information, it's transformation, if you're willing to do the work. What you'll learn. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear and practical understanding of what the shadow is, and more importantly, how it's been quietly shaping your emotions, your thoughts, your impulses. You'll see why your emotional outbursts, your anxiety attacks, your periods of depression or unexplained guilt don't always come from the outside world. They often come from the parts of yourself you've hidden, repressed, and forgotten. And no, we're not going to fix this with surface-level positivity or trendy wellness tips. You'll learn a real, deep psychological approach that's been evolving for over a century. This is about confronting the darkest parts of your psyche and integrating them into your conscious self. It's serious work, but it's also liberating. How to watch this course. This is not a passive video. This is a space for active self-inquiry. Pause when something hits you. Take notes. Re-watch the difficult sections. Every concept shared here has the power to reshape how you see yourself and the world, if you put it into practice. If you're not ready to face discomfort, this may not be for you. But if you are, what's waiting on the other side is emotional freedom. You'll learn why repressing the shadow is at the root of so many psychological issues. How your persona, the mask you wear in society, keeps you emotionally fragile. How the archetypes of the collective unconscious sneak into your daily life. And how to apply all this knowledge in a practical, transformative way. This isn't just theory, it's a structured introduction to the psychological path of individuation, Jung's term for the journey of becoming your whole, authentic self. If you're truly ready to stop being emotionally tossed around by life, if you want to navigate your deepest feelings with strength instead of fear, you're exactly where you need to be. Just one request. Watch until the end and apply what you learn. Let's dive in. Understanding the shadow. Jung called it the shadow. All the stuff you don't want to see in yourself. The things you deny, reject, repress, or pretend don't exist inside you. This is where our work begins. Because unless you truly understand what the shadow is and how much control it has over your emotional life, you'll never be free from it. Here's the deal. From the time you were little, you were told, directly and indirectly, what's okay to feel and what's not. Be polite, be nice, be helpful, but don't show anger. Don't be jealous, don't be selfish, don't be too sad. So, as any child would, you quickly learned some emotions get you love and approval, others bring criticism, punishment, or shame. And what do we do with those unacceptable parts of us? We push them away. We bury them. We pretend they're not there. That's how the shadow is formed. But here's the kicker. Those repressed emotions and impulses don't disappear. They stay alive, just below the surface, operating in the unconscious. They start shaping your thoughts, your decisions, your emotional reactions. And you don't even realize it's happening. What's really behind your emotional pain? Let's take a closer look at how the shadow shows up. That anxiety you can't explain? Often, it's a signal from the shadow, a bubbling up of unresolved inner conflicts. That depressive episode you fall into. It could be repressed sadness and anger that's been trapped in your psyche for years. Those moments of rage that feel like they come out of nowhere. That's the shadow screaming for attention. Constantly sabotaging your goals, even when you deeply want to succeed. That's the shadow pulling you back. The shadow isn't inherently evil. It actually holds incredible power, emotional energy, creativity, strength. But when it's not recognized, it acts autonomously. And that's when the real problems begin. This is why so many people feel stuck in emotional loops. They don't know why they keep making the same mistakes, why their relationships blow up, or why they feel anxious all the time. It's not because they're broken. It's because their shadow is running the show. The hard truth. Here's a truth most people aren't ready to hear. You are not just your good side. You're not just the version of yourself you like to show the world. You are also your rage, your envy, your sadness, your fear. You are the parts you wish didn't exist. And the more you try to run from those parts, the weaker you become. Integration isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about saying, yes, I have anger. Yes, I feel jealous. Yes, I crave control sometimes. And that's okay. These are human emotions. They're part of me. But by bringing them into the light, I can work with them instead of being controlled by them from the dark. What's next? In the next section, we're going to go deeper. You'll learn how the shadow directly influences your daily emotions and decisions without your awareness. You might think you're in control of your emotional life, but what you'll discover might surprise you. And if you're open to it, it could change everything. Let's keep going. So now you know what the shadow is, the hidden, repressed parts of yourself, and how it silently shapes your emotions and patterns. But let's go one step deeper. Let's look at how the shadow influences your daily life, your relationships, your decisions, oftentimes without you having any idea. The shadow isn't abstract, it's active. Here's something important to understand. The shadow isn't just some vague concept tucked away in the back of your mind. It's not philosophical. It's alive, and it's working behind the scenes every single day. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Let that sink in. If you've ever felt like life keeps throwing you the same painful lessons, or you keep ending up in the same kind of relationship, or job, or emotional crisis, despite your best efforts, it's not fate. It's not bad luck. It's your shadow. Why your emotions feel out of control. Let's talk emotions. Specifically, why certain feelings seem to take you over like a wave. Think about this. As a child, you were taught not just what to do, but what to feel. You were told that some feelings were bad or inappropriate: anger, selfishness, jealousy, fear. So you shoved them down. But here's the thing. Just because you repress a feeling doesn't mean it dies. It hides, and it waits. Then, in adulthood, you find yourself having intense emotional reactions that you can't explain. You're hit with a wave of anxiety before a simple conversation. You snap in anger over something trivial. You feel paralyzed by guilt for a mistake that doesn't really matter. You suddenly spiral into sadness without any clear reason. These aren't random. These are echoes from your shadow. Jung called these reactions autonomous complexes, basically emotional fragments that act on their own, beyond your conscious control. They're like old, buried programs running silently in the background until they hijack the system. And when they do, it doesn't feel like you're choosing your emotions. They feel like they're choosing you. the shadow and self-sabotage. It's not just emotions. The shadow impacts your decisions too. Let's say you always end up dating people who hurt you, or you get close to success, and then suddenly procrastinate until the opportunity slips away. Or maybe you're constantly putting yourself down, never quite able to feel enough. These aren't coincidences. These are self-sabotaging behaviors rooted in shadow material. Your conscious mind wants progress. It wants peace. But your shadow, still carrying rejection, anger, unworthiness, is working in the opposite direction. Why? Because the unconscious mind doesn't care about your goals. It only wants expression. So if there's something inside you that hasn't been acknowledged or integrated, it will find a way to make itself known, even if it means ruining your plans to do it. Thinking you're in control? Think again. Here's one of the hardest truths to accept. You are not as in control of your emotions and choices as you think you are, especially if you haven't done the work to understand your shadow. You might believe, I'm just an anxious person, or I guess I'm just unlucky in love, or that's just how I am. But the reality is, these patterns are being fueled by unconscious material, by stories and beliefs and emotions that you haven't yet brought into the light. And until you do, they'll keep steering the ship while you sit there wondering why nothing ever changes. The role of the persona. Now here's where it gets even more interesting and even more uncomfortable. There's a reason the shadow gets buried in the first place, and that reason is the persona. The persona is the mask you wear to function in the world. It's the version of yourself you carefully craft to be liked, respected, accepted. It's the social self. And honestly, it's not bad. We all need a persona to survive and connect. But the problem comes when you start to believe that your persona is your real self. When you forget that it's just a part of you, not the whole. Because the more you cling to that polished image, the more of your authentic self you have to hide to keep it up. Let's break that down with an example. If your persona is the calm, composed, nice guy, then what happens when you feel rage, or competitiveness, or selfishness? You repress it. You tell yourself, that's not who I am, and shove it back into the darkness. But just because you pretend it isn't there doesn't mean it disappears. It becomes shadow. And the more perfect your persona becomes, the more positive, professional, or enlightened you try to act, the more material builds up in the shadow. That's why people who seem completely put together often secretly struggle with intense anxiety, depression, even breakdowns. The cost of maintaining the mask is emotional fragmentation. As Jung put it, the persona is a compromise between the individual and society, but it's also a deception because it distances us from who we really are. The mask is heavy. Wearing a persona is exhausting. You're constantly checking how you look, how you sound, whether you're being too much or not enough. Meanwhile, there's a storm brewing beneath the surface, and eventually it leaks out through panic attacks, mood swings, chronic fatigue, emotional numbness. That's the shadow demanding to be seen. So what's the solution? You have to start taking off the mask. That doesn't mean you throw all social norms out the window and start raging in the streets. It means you recognize that the persona is just a role, not your identity. You start to ask, what am I hiding to keep this image up? What feelings do I push away because they don't fit the character I play? What truths about myself make me uncomfortable? And most importantly, what is the shadow trying to tell me? Moving toward emotional freedom. The real power comes when you stop running from your shadow and start listening to it. Because underneath all that repressed emotion, there's insight, there's strength, there's a more complete version of you. But before we get there, we have to take one very important step: learning to recognize your shadow in daily life. What does that look like? It's not as mystical or abstract as it sounds. In fact, it's a lot more obvious than you think, once you know what to look for. In the next part, we'll explore the subtle but powerful ways your shadow shows up in everyday situations, emotions, and relationships. You'll start learning how to identify it in the moment, so you can begin the process of true integration. This is where the real transformation begins. Now that we've laid the foundation, the shadow, the persona, and how they shape your emotional world, it's time to get practical. Let's talk about how you can spot your shadow in daily life. Because contrary to what many people think, the shadow isn't some mystical force you need to meditate in a cave to find. It's right here. It's in your reactions, your judgments, your emotional triggers. The shadow shows up in the everyday. Carl Jung once said, "The shadow appears in spontaneous actions, in behavioral slips, and especially in our projections." Translation: you don't have to look far. Your shadow shows up in the little moments, often when you least expect it. Let's walk through some real-life examples. You're at work, and someone makes a small, harmless comment, but you suddenly feel a burst of hatred or irritation that seems way out of proportion. That's not about them. It's likely something about you that's being mirrored back. You find yourself constantly judging people who are emotional, calling them dramatic or weak. But if you look deeper, maybe you were taught to hide your own sensitivity. You've buried your emotional side, and now it triggers you when you see it in others. You feel jealous of someone's success and immediately justify it. They got lucky, they're fake, or they're just showing off. But beneath that reaction, a part of you that wants something similar, but has been denied or repressed. This is shadow projection in action. We see in others what we can't yet see or accept in ourselves. Emotional triggers as clues. Every strong emotional reaction is a breadcrumb leading you to your shadow. Start paying attention to those moments when your emotions feel bigger than the situation calls for. Ask yourself, why did that bother me so much? What part of me felt threatened? Is this really about the other person, or is something inside me being activated? Shadow work begins with this kind of inner honesty. It's not always easy, but it's the only way to stop reacting from the unconscious and start responding from self-awareness. The shadow in dreams. Now let's go one layer deeper, into your dreams. Jung emphasized that dreams are one of the clearest doorways to the unconscious, including your shadow. If you've ever had recurring dreams of being chased, confrontations with dark or threatening figures, losing control, animals that evoke fear or aggression, these are often the psyche's way of bringing shadow content to the surface. That figure chasing you, it's not just a nightmare. It could be your repressed anger, fear, or desire trying to get your attention. Keeping a dream journal, writing down symbols, emotions, and recurring patterns can help you decode the messages your unconscious is sending. And once you start seeing the shadow in your dreams, you'll begin to spot it more clearly in your waking life too. Your body keeps the score. Here's something many people overlook. Your body is also speaking the language of the shadow. Chronic tension in the shoulders, neck, or chest. Recurring stomach issues. Unexplained fatigue. Tight jaw, clenched fists, shallow breath. These aren't just physical symptoms. They're often the result of emotional energy being trapped and unexpressed. You can think of the body as the storage unit for everything the mind tries to suppress. When you refuse to feel or acknowledge certain emotions, grief, rage, desire, your body holds on to them. And over time, that unprocessed tension starts to wear you down. This is why real shadow work isn't just mental, it's embodied. It involves listening to your feelings, yes, but also your physical sensations. Start checking in with your body. Where am I holding tension? What part of me feels heavy or numb? What's the emotion beneath this sensation? This is where the mind-body connection becomes essential to integration. Reflective questions to find the shadow. Here's a simple but powerful way to get started. Ask yourself, what traits or behaviors in others make me irrationally angry or uncomfortable? What emotions or thoughts do I feel ashamed of or try to suppress? What do I judge harshly in others that I might also carry in myself? What do I constantly deny, justify, or avoid facing about myself? Write the answers down. Don't edit. Don't try to make yourself look good. Just be honest. Because this is where the gold is. Everything you can't accept about yourself has power over you. But everything you acknowledge, you begin to integrate and reclaim. Facing the shadow, what it really takes. Now comes the hard part, confrontation. Because recognizing your shadow is only the first step. To really transform, you have to face it. And that takes courage. Jung made this very clear. Individuation is not achieved by ignoring the shadow, but by confronting it. What does that mean in everyday terms? It means looking at the parts of yourself you don't like and sitting with them instead of running. Let's say you feel envy toward a friend who's successful. Your first instinct might be to brush it off. Good for them. I'm happy for them. But if you slow down and feel into that envy, you might discover something deeper, maybe a frustration with your own untapped potential, or a longing for validation that you haven't admitted. Facing the shadow means not running from that discomfort. Another example, maybe you constantly avoid conflict. You pride yourself on being easygoing. But when you explore that pattern, you realize it's not peace, it's fear. A fear of being disliked, a fear of confrontation, a fear of your own anger. And under that fear, a buried, repressed rage from years of being overlooked or dismissed. Facing your shadow means letting that rage surface, not to lash out, but to acknowledge it, honor it, and let it teach you something about who you are and what you need. This process often follows a pattern: denial. That's not me. Resistance. Okay, maybe it is, but I don't want to deal with it. Acceptance. This is a part of me. Integration. I'm learning to work with it consciously. This isn't a one-time thing. It's a lifelong journey. But each time you face a piece of your shadow, you gain a little more freedom. Tools for confronting the shadow. So how do you do it? Here are a few practical tools. Reflective writing. Journal about your emotional reactions, judgments, and triggers. Explore where they come from. Dream analysis. Keep a dream journal. Look for repeating themes or intense figures. Ask, what part of me does this represent? Body awareness. Notice physical tension or patterns of illness. Ask what emotion might be hiding underneath. Therapy. Jungian analysts or shadow work-focused therapists can help guide the process with clarity and safety. Mindful observation. Catch yourself in the moment when you feel triggered or reactive. Pause. Breathe. Ask what your shadow might be trying to show you. And most importantly, stay honest, stay curious, stay compassionate. Because as you begin to face your shadow, something unexpected happens. You start to feel stronger, less reactive, more centered, more whole. But something else begins to stir beneath the surface, something older, deeper, more universal. As you peel back the layers of your personal unconscious, you begin to touch something Jung called the collective unconscious, a realm of archetypes and patterns that go beyond your personal story. And in the next section, we'll explore what happens when these powerful archetypes start to awaken, how they can guide or challenge you on your journey, and why they're essential to full integration. Get ready, we're going deeper. As you move deeper into shadow work, something powerful begins to happen. You don't just meet your personal wounds, memories, and repressed feelings. You start encountering universal forces, deep psychological patterns that exist in every human psyche. Jung called these archetypes, and they are the invisible frameworks through which we live, love, suffer, and evolve. They are not content you've personally experienced. They're inherited, like a psychic blueprint, shared by all of humanity. And during the process of confronting and integrating the shadow, certain archetypes rise to the surface. Not to scare you, but to challenge you, guide you, and accelerate your growth. Let's break down the 4 most important archetypes that often appear in shadow work: the anima, the animus, the self, and the trickster. 1. The anima and animus. The anima is the unconscious feminine within men. The animus is the unconscious masculine within women. These archetypes act as bridges between your conscious mind and your inner world. They often show up through dreams, projections, or emotionally charged relationships. Let's say you're a man doing deep psychological work, and you start having vivid dreams of mysterious or alluring female figures. They might appear seductive, nurturing, wise, or dangerous. These figures aren't just random. They're representations of the anima, calling you to reconnect with your emotional depth, creativity, and inner intuition. For women, the animus might appear in dreams or fantasies as a dominant, rational, or authoritative male figure, sometimes inspiring, other times overpowering. He represents your will, your direction, your inner logos. When you meet these figures, they're not just symbols. They are doorways, offering you access to the hidden traits you've denied based on gender conditioning or personal experience. To integrate them means to balance within yourself what culture has often separated: emotion and reason, nurturing and structure, sensitivity and strength. 2. The self. The self is the deepest archetype in Jungian psychology. It's not the same as the ego or your social identity. The self represents your wholeness, the totality of your conscious and unconscious personality. It is the center, the unifying force, the blueprint of who you truly are beneath all masks and fragmentation. As you begin to integrate your shadow, the self emerges with a kind of magnetic pull. You might begin to feel more centered, more clear. You may go through deep existential questions. Who am I, really? What is my purpose? What matters to me now? This is the self nudging you toward a deeper alignment, pulling together your light and dark, your masculine and feminine, your persona and shadow. But the self doesn't just come with peace. It often triggers a psychological reorganization. Old identities fall away. What used to matter doesn't anymore. This can feel disorienting, even painful, but it's necessary. You're being rebuilt from the inside out. 3. The trickster. Now, meet the wild card. The trickster is the archetype of chaos, deception, rule-breaking, and playful disruption. And it shows up most often when you think you've figured it all out. Let's say you've made great progress. You've faced your anger, explored your trauma, started feeling more whole. Then suddenly, a new pattern emerges. You start feeling superior to others who aren't doing the work. You find yourself regressing into old behaviors you thought you'd moved past. You become overly confident in your insights, missing blind spots hiding in plain sight. That's the trickster. Its role isn't to punish you, it's to humble you. The trickster exists to make sure your growth doesn't turn into a new ego trap. It reminds you that the work is never truly done, that every time you think you've reached the final level, there's another layer waiting underneath. It's uncomfortable, but also essential. The trickster keeps you honest. Why this matters? Understanding these archetypes gives you language and orientation in a confusing inner terrain. When you start recognizing them, not just as theories, but as real forces playing out in your dreams, relationships, and emotional patterns, you become more skillful in the work of integration. Because the truth is, integrating your shadow is about far more than emotional control or self-help. It's about reclaiming your wholeness as a human being. You stop being tossed around by unconscious patterns, and you begin to act from a place of clarity, presence, and grounded strength. Let's take a moment now to talk about what happens when you truly integrate your shadow, and why this work is worth every ounce of effort. Emotional strength, the real outcome of shadow work. So, why go through all this discomfort? Why face emotions you've spent a lifetime avoiding? Because the result is something rare and incredibly powerful. Emotional strength. Let me be clear. Being emotionally strong doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you're not dominated by it. You know how to sit with discomfort without panicking. You can experience anger without exploding, sadness without drowning, fear without freezing. Let's look at some examples. Someone who's always struggled with explosive anger begins to recognize their triggers, trace their rage to early emotional wounds, and consciously express boundaries before they reach the breaking point. A person paralyzed by social anxiety begins to understand that beneath the fear is a shadow filled with perfectionism, shame, and a need for approval. And by working with it, they reclaim confidence and self-respect. Another begins to act with more authenticity, not because they've perfected their image, but because they've stopped needing to hide who they are. This is what shadow work unlocks. Authenticity. You're no longer living for approval. You live in alignment. Resilience. You stop reacting impulsively. You respond consciously. Clarity. You see yourself more clearly, and others too, because projection no longer clouds your view. Peace. Not from avoiding pain, but from making peace with all that you are. Jung said, "The acceptance of the dark side of oneself strengthens the individual because it makes them whole. And wholeness is stronger than any persona." How to stay awake in everyday life. Now let's bring this all the way down to earth. How do you stay connected to your shadow work when life gets busy, when your old patterns come knocking? Here are 7 real practical habits to keep the work alive. Self-reflection. Take time each day, even just 5 minutes, to reflect on your emotional responses. What triggered you today? What might that reaction be pointing to? Journaling. Write freely. Don't try to sound wise. Just tell the truth. Get curious about the parts of you that show up when you're triggered, angry, or insecure. Dream tracking. Keep a journal by your bed. Write dreams down the moment you wake up. Over time, you'll see patterns, and you'll start to meet your inner archetypes face to face. Body check-ins. Your tension, your fatigue, your gut feelings. They all have stories. Start listening to them. What emotion are you holding in your body? Mindfulness, meditation, even just 10 minutes a day, helps you observe your patterns instead of getting caught in them. Conscious relationships. Use your interactions as mirrors. When someone triggers you, ask, "What part of myself am I seeing in them?" Drop the perfectionism. You're not here to be flawless. You're here to be whole. Let yourself be messy, human, complex. The journey never ends, and that's a good thing. Here's the truth. No one tells you. Mastering the shadow is a one-way path. Once you begin to see, you can't unsee. Once you've felt what it's like to live more honestly, more freely, more fully, you can't go back to sleep. You can try to pretend, but your psyche won't let you. The shadow will always pull you toward wholeness. That might sound intense, but it's actually a gift, because it means that no matter how many times you stumble, regress, or fall apart, you're always moving forward. Even your struggles become part of your evolution. So here's your invitation. If this course resonated with you, commit to this journey. Say it out loud. Write it in the comments. I am willing to face my shadow. Let that be your first act of courage. And don't stop here. Keep exploring. Watch the next video on the channel. Rewatch this one if needed. Do the inner work. Let it change you. You don't have to become perfect. You just have to become whole. And when you do, you'll find that the shadow doesn't disappear, but you will become greater than it. Move forward.